There are relationships that enter your life to heal you, and there are relationships that enter your life to expose you. Some people are not sent to stay forever. They are sent to wake you up, and the painful part is this. Many people keep begging Allah to save a relationship that was only meant to teach them a lesson. You ignore the red flags. You ignore the constant anxiety. You ignore how your connection with Allah becomes weaker instead of stronger, because your heart became attached to the feeling, not the truth. But listen carefully, not every person you deeply love is your eternal soulmate. Sometimes Allah allows someone to enter your life so you can finally see your wounds, your weaknesses, your unhealthy attachments, your lack of self-worth, and the parts of your soul that still need healing. And if you do not understand the lesson, you may spend years suffering inside a relationship that was never written to give you peace. In this video, we will uncover 4 powerful signs that your current relationship may be a lesson rather than your eternal soulmate, and why Allah sometimes breaks hearts to protect souls. And before we begin, from where are you watching this video? And what time is it in your city or country right now? The relationship pulls you away from Allah instead of bringing you closer. One of the most dangerous signs that your relationship is a lesson rather than your eternal soulmate is this. The deeper you fall into the relationship, the farther you drift from Allah. At first, everything feels beautiful. The conversations feel comforting. Their attention feels healing. Their presence makes your loneliness disappear for a while. You start believing this person finally understands you in a way nobody else ever has. You begin imagining your future with them. You replay their words in your mind before sleeping. You check your phone constantly hoping for their message. Your emotions slowly become tied to their attention without you even realizing it. And this is where many people become spiritually blind. Because sometimes what feels emotionally exciting is spiritually dangerous. At the beginning, you tell yourself the relationship is harmless. You convince yourself your intentions are pure. You keep saying, maybe this will become halal one day. Maybe Allah brought this person into my life for a reason. Maybe this connection is special. But while your heart keeps creating excuses, your soul quietly starts weakening. You begin delaying prayers because your mind is distracted by them. Your concentration in worship disappears because your thoughts are consumed by the relationship. You open your phone more than you open the Quran. You become emotionally dependent on a human being for peace instead of turning toward Allah. And the frightening part is this: many people do not notice the spiritual damage until their heart becomes completely attached. That is why unhealthy attachment is so dangerous. Because when your heart becomes overly attached to someone, you start fearing their loss more than displeasing Allah. You start protecting the relationship even when it is hurting your soul. You ignore the anxiety, the confusion, the guilt, the emotional instability, because your emotions are addicted to the temporary comfort they give you. But listen carefully. Real love should never make your relationship with Allah weaker. A person written for your peace should inspire growth inside your soul, not spiritual emptiness. They should make you want to become better, cleaner, calmer, closer to Allah, more disciplined, more emotionally mature. They should not pull you into constant emotional chaos, secrecy, fear, obsession, emotional dependency, or disobedience. Allah says, perhaps you love a thing and it is bad for you, and perhaps you hate a thing and it is good for you. Allah knows while you do not know. Surah Al-Baqarah 22:16. Think deeply about this verse. Human beings judge through emotions. Allah judges through complete knowledge. You see the chemistry. Allah sees the future. You see the attachment. Allah sees the hidden damage. You see the temporary pleasure. Allah sees the pain waiting ahead. And sometimes the heart becomes so emotionally attached that it starts worshipping the feeling instead of seeking the truth. There are people who cry every night over someone who was never written for their peace. There are people begging Allah to save relationships that are slowly destroying their mental health, emotional stability, and spiritual connection. They think losing that person will destroy them, while Allah may actually be trying to save them. Not every strong emotional connection is a sign from Allah. Sometimes emotional intensity is simply a test, because Shaitan does not always destroy people through obvious sins. Sometimes he destroys people through emotional attachment that slowly weakens the soul over time. He makes toxic attachment feel romantic. He makes emotional obsession feel like destiny. He makes people chase human validation until their heart no longer finds peace in Allah. And this is why some relationships leave people spiritually empty. You smile during conversations with that person, but cry during tahajjud because your heart feels lost. You feel temporary happiness when they give attention, but unbearable anxiety when they become distant. Your peace depends on their behavior instead of your trust in Allah. That is not emotional stability, that is emotional captivity. A soulmate connection should not constantly leave your soul exhausted. It should not fill your chest with endless fear and confusion. It should not make you compromise your values, your dignity, your peace, or your deen just to keep someone from leaving. Real peace comes from Allah first. And when Allah places the right person into your life, that relationship becomes a source of tranquility rather than spiritual destruction. Even during hardship, there is respect. Even during disagreement, there is emotional safety. Even during tests, there is still peace inside the soul. But lesson relationships often feel different. They feel addictive instead of peaceful, emotionally intense instead of emotionally safe, spiritually distracting instead of spiritually grounding. And many people confuse emotional addiction with love because they have never experienced healthy attachment before. Sometimes Allah allows these painful relationships because He wants to expose what still controls your heart. Maybe you depended too much on human validation. Maybe loneliness made you vulnerable. Maybe you were searching for emotional fulfillment in people instead of strengthening your relationship with Allah. So Allah allows the relationship to reveal the weakness hidden inside your soul, not to destroy you, but to awaken you, because some lessons can only be learned through heartbreak. And one of the hardest truths to accept is this: sometimes the person you desperately want is the very person Allah knows will damage your future the most. Years later, many people finally understand why certain relationships failed. They look back and realize they were emotionally blind. They realize they were chasing feelings while ignoring the condition of their soul. They realize Allah was protecting them through separation even when the pain felt unbearable. That heartbreak you cried over may have actually been mercy in disguise, because Allah does not always remove people to punish you. Sometimes He removes people because He loves you enough to prevent your soul from drowning in a connection that was never written to give you peace. You are constantly chasing peace that never stays. One of the clearest signs that your relationship is not your eternal soulmate, but a painful lesson sent to awaken your soul is this: no matter how hard you try, peace never stays for long. There are moments when things feel beautiful. There are moments when they give you attention, affection, reassurance, and emotional warmth. For a short time, your heart relaxes. You start believing maybe things are finally improving. Maybe the problems are over. Maybe this relationship is finally becoming what you always hoped it would become. But then suddenly, the anxiety returns, the distance returns, the confusion returns. The overthinking returns, the emotional instability returns, and once again, your heart falls into exhaustion. You spend nights replaying conversations in your head, trying to understand what changed. You stare at your phone, wondering why their energy suddenly feels cold. You keep searching for hidden meanings behind short replies, delayed messages, strange behavior, emotional inconsistency, and unexplained distance. Your mind never rests because your heart never feels secure. And this is the dangerous cycle many people mistake for love. They think emotional chaos means the connection is deep. They think the constant emotional highs and lows make the relationship special. They become addicted to temporary affection because the inconsistency makes every small moment of attention feel powerful. But listen carefully, chaos is not love. Confusion is not love. Emotional instability is not love. A soulmate connection may still face hardships, misunderstandings, financial struggles, family pressure, or difficult seasons in life, but deep inside, there is still emotional safety, there is still sincerity, there is still respect. There is still a feeling that your soul can breathe around that person. But lesson relationships often leave you emotionally starving. You keep chasing reassurance that never lasts. You keep trying to earn consistency from someone who keeps changing emotionally. You keep hoping they will suddenly become the person you imagined in your mind. And sometimes the relationship survives only because of your hope, not because of genuine peace. This is why many people remain trapped for years inside emotionally unhealthy relationships. They are not staying because they are truly at peace. They are staying because they are addicted to the possibility that one day things might finally change. But the frightening reality is this: a relationship that constantly damages your emotional stability can slowly damage your soul too, because when your heart lives in constant anxiety, you lose yourself slowly. Your focus weakens, your inner peace disappears, your emotional energy becomes consumed by stress, fear, and uncertainty. You stop enjoying life properly because your emotions become controlled by someone else's behavior. Some people cannot sleep peacefully anymore because of relationship stress. Some people lose confidence in themselves because they constantly feel emotionally unwanted. Some people begin questioning their worth because the person they love keeps making them feel emotionally insecure. And the painful part is this: they still call it love. But Allah never described love as emotional torture. Allah says, "And among His signs is that He created for you spouses from among yourselves, so that you may find tranquility in them, and He placed between you affection and mercy." Surah Ar-Rum 30:21. Notice the words Allah uses carefully. Affection, mercy, tranquility, not emotional games, not constant fear, not endless confusion, not sleepless nights filled with anxiety. Tranquility means your soul feels safe. It means your heart is not constantly preparing for emotional pain. It means the relationship becomes a place of comfort during hardship, not the source of the hardship itself. And this is where many people ignore one of the biggest warnings Allah places in front of them. When a relationship repeatedly destroys your peace, drains your emotional energy, weakens your mental health, and fills your life with constant instability, your soul may already know the truth your emotions refuse to accept. Because deep inside, people can often feel when something is wrong. That constant heaviness in your chest, that endless anxiety, that emotional exhaustion after every conversation, that fear of losing them every single day. Sometimes those feelings are warnings, not signs of true love. Some relationships are sent to teach you what happens when you become emotionally attached to instability, and the longer you stay inside that chaos, the more damage it creates inside your heart. Many people eventually lose themselves trying to keep unstable relationships alive. They become emotionally dependent on tiny moments of affection. A single message suddenly controls their happiness. A delayed reply ruins their entire day. One small argument destroys their peace for hours. Their emotional world becomes controlled by another human being. That is not healthy love. That is emotional imprisonment. A person written for your peace should not constantly make you feel unwanted, emotionally unsafe, mentally drained, or spiritually lost. Even during difficult moments, there should still be emotional sincerity and mercy. But lesson relationships often operate through emotional inconsistency. One day they make you feel deeply loved. The next day they make you feel invisible. One moment they promise forever. The next moment they pull away emotionally. One day they speak about marriage and loyalty. The next day they make you question your entire place in their life. And slowly, your nervous system becomes addicted to unpredictability. This is why some people struggle to leave unhealthy relationships. Their heart becomes attached, not to peace, but to emotional survival. They begin craving the temporary relief that comes after emotional pain. They become trapped inside cycles of hope and disappointment. And Shaitan loves this kind of emotional confusion because it weakens the soul slowly. A distracted heart struggles to focus on Allah. An anxious heart struggles to feel peace. An emotionally exhausted heart becomes spiritually weak over time. This is why some heartbreaks are actually acts of mercy from Allah, because if the relationship continued, it may have destroyed your emotional stability even more deeply. Allah sometimes removes people before the damage becomes permanent, but many people only understand this years later. At first, separation feels unbearable. You cry, you beg Allah to bring them back. You feel like your world is collapsing. You cannot imagine life without them. Then time passes, and suddenly you realize something shocking. The peace you kept searching for inside the relationship only arrived after the relationship ended. You begin sleeping peacefully again. Your anxiety slowly decreases. Your mind becomes calmer. Your relationship with Allah becomes stronger. Your emotional stability slowly returns. And for the first time in a long time, your soul can finally breathe again. That is when many people realize the relationship was never their safe place. It was their lesson, because soulmate love brings tranquility to the heart. But lesson relationships keep you addicted to chasing peace that never stays. You keep losing yourself just to keep them from leaving. One of the most heartbreaking signs that your relationship is a lesson, rather than your eternal soulmate, is this. Little by little, you stop recognizing yourself. At first, the changes seem small. You tell yourself you are only being more understanding, more patient, more flexible. You convince yourself every relationship requires sacrifice, so you ignore the discomfort growing quietly inside your chest. But slowly, the relationship begins changing who you are. You start hiding your real feelings because you fear upsetting them. You stop expressing your needs because every difficult conversation turns into emotional distance, tension, or withdrawal. You begin apologizing even when you did nothing wrong because keeping the peace becomes more important than protecting your dignity. And without realizing it, you slowly abandon yourself. You become quieter than before, more anxious than before, more emotionally dependent than before, more insecure than before. The version of you that once felt confident, calm, and emotionally stable slowly disappears. And this is what toxic attachment often does to people. It convinces them to sacrifice their identity in exchange for temporary emotional closeness. Many people think losing themselves is proof of deep love. They say things like, "I would do anything for them," or "I cannot live without them," or "they are my entire world." But listen carefully. A human being was never supposed to become your entire world. That place belongs to Allah alone. The moment your happiness, identity, emotional stability, and self-worth become completely dependent on another person, your soul becomes fragile. Because now your peace can be destroyed the moment they change, leave, disappoint you, or emotionally withdraw from you. And that is why unhealthy attachment creates unbearable pain. Because you are no longer simply loving the person, you are depending on them for emotional survival. This is why some people stay inside emotionally harmful relationships, even when they are suffering deeply. They are terrified of losing the person because they no longer know who they are without them. And slowly, fear begins controlling their life. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. So they tolerate things they once promised themselves they would never tolerate. They accept disrespect because they fear losing the relationship. They ignore red flags because they are emotionally attached. They stay silent during emotional pain because they are scared the person will leave if they speak honestly. And eventually, the relationship becomes emotional captivity instead of love. Some people completely lose their identity trying to become lovable enough for someone who keeps making them feel emotionally insecure. They change how they dress, how they speak, how they think, how they behave. They start walking on emotional eggshells every day, carefully managing every word and action to avoid conflict or emotional withdrawal. But real love should never make you feel like you must erase yourself to deserve affection. A soulmate connection should allow your soul to feel emotionally safe enough to remain authentic. You should not constantly fear abandonment every time you express emotions, needs, concerns, or boundaries. And this is where many people misunderstand sacrifice in relationships. Healthy sacrifice is beautiful. It is part of love. It is part of mercy, patience, and commitment. But destroying your emotional health, dignity, identity, and peace just to stop someone from leaving is not healthy sacrifice. It is self-abandonment. And the frightening part is this: many people do not notice how deeply they have lost themselves until the relationship finally ends. Only then do they realize how exhausted they truly were. They realize they spent months or years emotionally performing for love, constantly trying to be enough, constantly trying to fix things alone, constantly trying to earn emotional consistency from someone who kept giving them instability instead of peace. Allah never intended love to feel like emotional slavery. Allah created relationships to bring mercy, comfort, emotional support, and tranquility into life. But lesson relationships often become places where your self-worth slowly dies. You stop trusting your own instincts because the person keeps confusing you emotionally. You begin questioning your value because their treatment becomes inconsistent. One day they make you feel deeply wanted. The next day they make you feel invisible, and this emotional inconsistency slowly damages your confidence. You begin thinking, maybe I am too emotional. Maybe I ask for too much. Maybe I am difficult to love. Maybe if I change more, they will finally stay. But the truth is, emotionally healthy love does not require you to destroy yourself to receive basic respect and care. Sometimes the relationship itself becomes a mirror, exposing wounds you never healed. Maybe childhood rejection made you desperate for validation. Maybe loneliness made attention feel addictive. Maybe past emotional pain made you terrified of abandonment. So when someone enters your life and gives you affection, your heart clings to them too deeply, because part of your soul believes losing them means losing your worth. But your worth was never created by another human being. Your value existed before they arrived, and your value will still exist if they leave. This is one of the hardest lessons many people must learn through heartbreak, because unhealthy attachment blinds people completely. There are individuals crying every night over people who are slowly destroying their emotional health. There are people sacrificing their dignity just to keep relationships alive a little longer. There are people begging for love from individuals who continuously make them feel emotionally unwanted. And the tragedy is this: they think enduring endless emotional pain proves loyalty, but sometimes loyalty to the wrong person becomes disloyalty to your own soul. A relationship sent by Allah for your peace should not constantly force you to betray your emotional well-being, your boundaries, your self-respect, your mental health, and your relationship with Him. The right person should inspire growth inside you, not emotional disappearance. But lesson relationships often consume people slowly. At first, you lose your peace, then you lose your confidence, then you lose your identity, then you lose your emotional stability, and eventually, you lose the connection with yourself that once made you feel alive. This is why some heartbreaks become awakenings, because after the relationship ends, people suddenly realize how much of themselves they sacrificed just to keep another human being close. And when they finally begin healing, they rediscover the version of themselves they abandoned during the relationship. Their confidence slowly returns. Their peace slowly returns. Their relationship with Allah becomes stronger again. Their emotional clarity becomes sharper. And one day they finally understand something powerful. If keeping someone requires losing yourself, they were never your soulmate to begin with, because true love should never demand the destruction of your soul as the price of companionship. Sometimes Allah allows painful relationships because He wants to teach you this lesson before your future marriage. Never love someone so much that you forget your own worth. The relationship teaches you through pain more than through peace. One of the deepest signs that your relationship is a lesson rather than your eternal soulmate is this: the relationship changes you more through pain than through peace. There are relationships that nurture the soul gently. They bring emotional safety, mercy, sincerity, stability, and growth through compassion. Even during hardship, your heart still feels protected. Even during disagreements, your dignity remains intact. Even during difficult seasons, your soul still feels calm beside that person. But lesson relationships often feel completely different. They transform you through emotional suffering. The relationship becomes a place where your deepest fears are exposed. Your insecurities rise to the surface. Your attachment wounds become visible. Your emotional weaknesses begin revealing themselves one by one, and suddenly, you find yourself feeling emotions you never expected to feel so intensely. Fear, jealousy, anxiety, overthinking, emotional exhaustion, obsessive attachment, sleepless nights, constant sadness, emotional instability. At first, you think the relationship itself is the answer to your pain. You think if the person finally changes, reassures you, commits fully, or becomes emotionally consistent, everything inside you will finally become peaceful. But what many people fail to realize is this: sometimes Allah allows painful relationships, not because the relationship is your destination, but because the pain itself is carrying a lesson your soul desperately needs. Because some people only wake up spiritually after heartbreak shakes them deeply. Before the relationship, maybe you were emotionally careless. Maybe you ignored red flags easily because loneliness made attention feel valuable. Maybe you became attached too quickly. Maybe you depended too heavily on human validation. Maybe your self-worth secretly depended on how loved you felt by others. And then Allah allowed someone to enter your life who exposed every weakness hidden inside your heart. Suddenly, your fear of abandonment became visible. Your emotional dependency became visible. Your insecurity became visible. Your lack of boundaries became visible. Your unhealthy attachment patterns became visible. And while the experience feels painful, the pain is revealing truths about yourself that comfort never would have revealed. This is why some relationships feel spiritually exhausting from the very beginning, because the relationship is acting like a mirror. It reflects the wounds you never healed. It exposes the emotional patterns you kept ignoring. It forces you to confront parts of yourself you spent years hiding from. And this process hurts deeply. There are nights when you cry and ask Allah why this relationship is hurting you so much. There are moments when your chest feels heavy every single day. You feel emotionally drained from constantly thinking, hoping, worrying, waiting, and overanalyzing. You want peace so badly, but the relationship keeps giving you emotional storms instead. And the painful truth is this: some relationships are not sent to complete your life story. They are sent to transform your soul. Because some lessons cannot be learned through comfort. Some people only return to Allah sincerely after heartbreak humbles them. Some people only learn self-respect after emotional betrayal destroys them. Some people only begin healing childhood wounds after a painful relationship exposes how deeply damaged their attachment patterns truly were. This is why painful relationships often become life-changing turning points. At first, all you see is suffering. But years later, you realize the relationship forced you to grow in ways you never would have grown otherwise. You become wiser about people, wiser about emotions, wiser about attachment, wiser about your own weaknesses. You stop confusing attention with love. You stop ignoring red flags. You stop chasing emotionally unavailable people. You stop sacrificing your dignity for temporary affection. And slowly, pain begins transforming you into a stronger person. But during the relationship itself, this transformation often feels unbearable, because lesson relationships usually create emotional addiction before they create emotional wisdom. One day they make you feel deeply wanted. The next day they make you feel abandoned. One moment they fill your heart with hope. The next moment they fill your heart with confusion, and your nervous system becomes trapped inside cycles of emotional chaos. This is why some people remain emotionally attached even while suffering terribly. The relationship becomes painful, but the occasional moments of affection keep reigniting hope, so they stay trapped between heartbreak and temporary comfort. And over time, the emotional instability begins damaging every part of their inner world. their confidence weakens, their peace disappears, their sleep becomes restless, their relationship with Allah becomes distracted, their thoughts become consumed by fear and overthinking, yet they still struggle to let go, because attachment can make suffering feel safer than loneliness. But Allah did not create love to emotionally destroy people, and this is something many individuals only understand after the heartbreak finally ends. When separation happens, it feels like the end of the world at first. You cry endlessly, you replay memories constantly, you beg Allah for answers, you wonder why your heart became attached, if the relationship was never meant to last. But slowly, the fog begins lifting. You begin seeing things clearly for the first time. You realize how emotionally unstable the relationship truly was. You realize how much anxiety you normalized. You realize how much pain you tolerated just to avoid losing someone. And suddenly you understand something shocking. The relationship itself was not the blessing. The lesson hidden inside the pain was the blessing. Because without that painful experience, you may never have discovered the emotional wounds living inside you. You may never have learned the importance of boundaries. You may never have realized how dangerous emotional dependency can become. You may never have strengthened your relationship with Allah the way heartbreak forced you to. Sometimes Allah allows heartbreak because your soul is being prepared for something healthier. Imagine entering marriage while still emotionally dependent, insecure, desperate for validation, unable to create boundaries and addicted to unhealthy attachment. Those hidden wounds would eventually damage even a good relationship. So Allah teaches first, and sometimes the teaching comes through pain. That is why some heartbreaks completely change people. After the relationship ends, they become emotionally wiser than before. They become slower to attach, more aware of red flags, more protective of their peace, more conscious of their relationship with Allah, more emotionally mature. The pain reshapes them, and eventually they realize something powerful. The person they cried over every night may never have been their soulmate, but the lesson changed their life forever. Because not every relationship is meant to stay permanently. Some relationships are classrooms for the soul. They come into your life to expose, awaken, humble, mature, and transform you before the person truly written for your peace eventually arrives. And one of the hardest truths to accept is this: sometimes Allah breaks your heart because the version of you created after the heartbreak is closer to Him, wiser, stronger, and healthier than the version that entered the relationship. That is why some painful endings are actually hidden mercy. Because Allah sees the future your emotions cannot see. You may see loss. Allah may see protection. You may see heartbreak. Allah may see transformation. You may see the end of love. Allah may see the beginning of your healing. And years later, many people finally look back at the relationship that once destroyed them emotionally and whisper, "Now I understand why Allah did not allow it to continue." You keep forcing what Allah keeps trying to remove. One of the most painful signs that your relationship is not your eternal soulmate but a lesson sent to protect your future is this: no matter how desperately you try to hold on to the relationship, everything keeps falling apart. You try fixing it. You try praying for it. You try fighting for it. You try understanding them more. You give chances after chances after chances. You ignore your own pain, hoping things will finally improve. But somehow, peace never fully arrives. Every time you think things are becoming stable, another emotional storm appears, another disappointment appears, another betrayal of trust appears, another painful argument appears, another confusing situation appears, and deep inside your chest, your soul begins feeling exhausted. Because sometimes Allah places obstacles in front of relationships, not to punish you, but to stop you from walking towards something that would eventually destroy your peace. But many people become so emotionally attached that they stop seeing Allah's warnings clearly. They only see their feelings. And feelings can blind people in dangerous ways. A person can cry for someone who is slowly destroying them emotionally. A person can beg Allah for a relationship that is weakening their soul. A person can become so attached to temporary affection that they ignore every sign that the relationship is harming them deeply. This is why emotional attachment without wisdom becomes dangerous. Because once emotions take control completely, people start forcing doors that Allah keeps trying to close. And the frightening part is this: the more Allah blocks the relationship, the more some people chase it obsessively. Instead of asking, why is this becoming so painful, they keep asking, how can I force this to work? Instead of listening to the exhaustion inside their soul, they keep silencing it because they fear losing the person more than losing themselves. But listen carefully. Allah sees what you cannot see. You may see chemistry. Allah sees future heartbreak. You may see emotional attachment. Allah sees hidden damage. You may see temporary happiness. Allah sees years of emotional suffering waiting ahead. This is why some relationships become heavier and heavier over time, because your soul can feel when something is not aligned with peace. You begin living in constant emotional uncertainty. Your mind becomes consumed with overthinking. Your heart becomes addicted to searching for reassurance. Every small interaction starts affecting your mood. Your emotional stability depends on whether the person gives attention or withdraws emotionally. And yet, despite all the suffering, you still keep trying to force the relationship to survive. Why? Because human beings often fear letting go of familiar pain more than facing the uncertainty of starting over. Sometimes people stay in unhealthy relationships not because they are happy, but because they are emotionally terrified of emptiness. They fear being alone. They fear losing the future they imagined. They fear accepting that the relationship may never become what they hoped for. So they keep chasing a version of the relationship that does not actually exist anymore. And this emotional desperation slowly destroys the soul. Because forcing what Allah keeps disrupting often creates unbearable emotional exhaustion. There are relationships where everything constantly becomes complicated. Families oppose it. Trust keeps breaking. Communication keeps collapsing. Emotional peace keeps disappearing. The relationship repeatedly becomes unstable no matter how many times you try fixing it. Yet emotionally attached hearts continue fighting reality. And sometimes Allah allows repeated disappointment because He is trying to wake you up. Because one of the hardest truths to accept is this: not every person you love is written for your future. Some people are only written for one chapter of your life. They enter your story to teach lessons, expose wounds, humble your heart, strengthen your dependence on Allah, and emotionally mature you before the right person eventually arrives. But if you keep forcing temporary people to become permanent, you may delay your own healing. This is why some heartbreaks feel like emotional battles between your soul and your attachment. Deep inside, your soul feels tired. It feels the instability. It feels the anxiety. It feels the emotional inconsistency. It feels the spiritual heaviness. But your emotions keep saying, maybe if I try harder, maybe if I stay patient, maybe if I sacrifice more, maybe if I love them enough, maybe things will finally change. And many people spend years emotionally trapped inside relationships built entirely on hope instead of peace. Hope is beautiful when it is attached to something healthy, but hope can become destructive when it keeps you chained to emotional suffering. Allah never intended love to become a prison for your soul, and this is why sometimes separation itself becomes mercy. But emotionally attached hearts cannot understand this immediately. At first, separation feels unbearable. It feels like your chest is collapsing. It feels like your future disappeared overnight. You replay memories constantly. You wonder why Allah allowed you to love someone so deeply if they were never meant to stay. But what many people fail to understand is this: Allah sometimes allows attachment so the lesson can reach your heart completely. Because there are certain truths human beings only understand after pain humbles them deeply. Sometimes Allah lets you chase something until exhaustion finally teaches you what wisdom could not teach earlier. And eventually, after enough heartbreak, disappointment, confusion, emotional instability, sleepless nights, anxiety and tears, the soul begins surrendering, not because it stopped loving the person, but because it finally understands that love without peace destroys people slowly. This is where healing truly begins. When you stop worshipping the relationship, when you stop chasing what Allah keeps removing, when you stop forcing what keeps damaging your soul, and suddenly, for the first time in a long time, your heart begins breathing again. You begin noticing how emotionally drained you truly were. You realize how much of your energy was consumed by fear, anxiety, confusion, and emotional instability. You recognize how much of yourself you sacrificed trying to save something that kept hurting you. And one day, clarity finally arrives. You realize Allah was not taking something valuable away from you. He was saving you from a future your emotions were too blind to see. Because some people are blessings, but some people are lessons disguised as blessings. And if Allah keeps removing someone from your path, despite all your efforts, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is stop forcing what He is trying to take away. Because what is truly written for your peace will not require the destruction of your soul to remain in your life. The right relationship will not constantly leave you emotionally starving, spiritually distracted, mentally exhausted, and emotionally unstable. The right relationship may still face hardships, but it will not feel like endless warfare inside your chest every single day. This is why emotionally mature people eventually learn something powerful. Not every closed door is rejection. Sometimes closed doors are protection. Sometimes Allah blocks relationships because He knows the version of you that would exist years later if that relationship continued. And sometimes the greatest mercy Allah gives you is removing someone you were too emotionally attached to. Let go of yourself. Years later, many people finally look back at the relationship they once begged Allah to save and thank Him for ending it, because they eventually realize something painful but beautiful. The relationship they were crying over was never their forever home. It was only a lesson preparing their soul for something healthier, safer, and more peaceful in the future. The relationship exposes the wounds you never healed. One of the most life-changing signs that your relationship is a lesson rather than your eternal soulmate is this: the relationship begins exposing emotional wounds inside you that you never realized were controlling your life. At first, you believe the relationship itself is the problem. You think the pain only comes from their behavior. You think your anxiety only exists because of the instability. You think your emotional exhaustion only comes from the arguments, the confusion, the inconsistency, and the fear of losing them. But slowly, something deeper starts revealing itself. You begin noticing reactions inside yourself that feel much bigger than the situation itself. A delayed message suddenly ruins your entire day. A small emotional distance feels like abandonment. One disagreement makes you panic internally. One cold interaction makes you question your worth completely. And suddenly you realize this relationship is not only affecting your emotions, it is exposing wounds that were already living inside you long before this person arrived. This is why lesson relationships often feel so emotionally intense, because they touch unhealed parts of the soul. Maybe you grew up feeling emotionally unseen, so attention now feels addictive. Maybe you experienced rejection earlier in life, so abandonment terrifies you deeply. Maybe loneliness made you emotionally hungry for connection. Maybe past pain made you desperate for reassurance. Maybe your self-worth was never fully healed, so now your heart depends on another person to feel valuable. And when someone enters your life and gives you affection, validation, emotional intimacy, and attention, your wounded heart clings to them with terrifying intensity, not because they are necessarily your soulmate, but because they temporarily soothe pain you never healed properly. This is one of the hardest truths many people must confront. Sometimes what feels like deep love is actually deep emotional dependency created by old wounds. And this is why certain relationships completely consume people emotionally, because the relationship becomes more than companionship. It becomes emotional survival. You stop simply wanting the person. You begin needing them emotionally. You need their attention to feel calm. You need their reassurance to feel secure. You need their affection to feel worthy. You need their presence to feel emotionally stable. And the moment they become distant, your entire emotional world begins collapsing. This is why unhealed wounds make attachment extremely dangerous, because now another human being controls your peace. A delayed reply affects your mood. A small argument destroys your sleep. A slight emotional change creates panic inside your chest. And many people call this intensity true love. But sometimes it is simply unresolved pain attaching itself to temporary comfort. A soulmate relationship should not constantly activate fear inside your nervous system. It should not repeatedly trigger emotional panic, insecurity, desperation, and emotional instability every single day. Yet lesson relationships often do exactly that. They expose every hidden emotional weakness inside you. Your fear of abandonment becomes visible. Your emotional dependency becomes visible. Your insecurity becomes visible. Your need for validation becomes visible. Your lack of boundaries becomes visible. And while this process feels painful, it is revealing truths about your soul that Allah may want you to heal before your future marriage. Because unhealed wounds can destroy even healthy love. Imagine entering marriage while still emotionally dependent on validation. Imagine expecting another human being to constantly heal your insecurity. Imagine living in fear every time your spouse becomes busy, distracted, tired, or emotionally overwhelmed. Without healing, old wounds eventually poison relationships slowly. This is why Allah sometimes allows painful emotional experiences before giving lasting love, because some hearts need healing before they are ready for healthy companionship, and lesson relationships often become the mirror exposing what still needs healing. At first, this realization hurts deeply, because you begin understanding that part of your suffering did not only come from the relationship itself, it came from the emotional wounds hidden inside you. That fear you felt every day, that desperation, that emotional obsession, that constant overthinking, that inability to let go even while suffering, all of it was connected to wounds you may have ignored for years. And this realization can feel devastating, because suddenly you understand why the relationship affected you so intensely. It was never only about the person. It was about what the person awakened inside you. This is why some people remain emotionally attached long after relationships end. They are not only grieving the person, they are grieving the emotional comfort, validation, fantasy, and temporary healing the relationship seemed to provide. And when the relationship disappears, all the old wounds return to the surface again. The loneliness returns, the insecurity returns, the emptiness returns, the fear returns, and many people mistake this pain as proof they lost their soulmate. But sometimes the pain is actually exposing how much healing still needs to happen inside the soul. This is where many people begin their deepest transformation, because heartbreak forces self-reflection. For the first time, they begin asking difficult questions. Why do I become attached so quickly? Why do I fear abandonment so deeply? Why does rejection destroy my self-worth? Why do I tolerate emotional pain just to avoid loneliness? Why do I keep chasing emotionally unavailable people? Why do I lose myself inside relationships? And slowly, awareness begins healing the soul. This is why some of the strongest people are created through heartbreak, because pain forces them to confront themselves honestly. Many people spend years distracting themselves from their wounds through relationships, attention, validation, entertainment, and emotional dependency. But heartbreak removes the distraction, and suddenly, they are alone with themselves, alone with their fears, alone with their wounds, alone with their insecurities, alone with the emotional pain they spent years avoiding. And while this process feels terrifying, it can also become the beginning of true healing, because healing only begins when awareness begins. Allah sometimes removes people because your soul's healing matters more than your temporary emotional attachment. And this is one of the hidden mercies behind painful endings. At first, you think Allah is taking love away from you, but later you realize He was exposing what needed healing before healthy love could truly enter your life. Because if those wounds remained hidden, they would eventually damage every future relationship too. This is why emotionally mature people stop asking only, "Why did this relationship end?" and they begin asking, "What was Allah trying to teach me through this pain?" That question changes everything, because now heartbreak becomes transformation instead of destruction. Now pain becomes awareness. Now suffering becomes growth. Now loss becomes healing. And eventually you begin rebuilding yourself differently. You stop depending on human validation for worth. You stop begging for love from emotionally inconsistent people. You stop chasing those who repeatedly disturb your peace. You stop abandoning yourself just to avoid loneliness. Instead, you begin strengthening your relationship with Allah. You begin healing your inner world. You begin rebuilding your confidence. You begin learning emotional discipline. You begin protecting your peace instead of sacrificing it. And slowly, your soul becomes stronger than it was before the relationship ever began. This is why some heartbreaks completely transform people spiritually, because the relationship that once destroyed them emotionally eventually becomes the reason they finally healed the parts of themselves they had ignored for years. And one day, they look back at the relationship they once thought was their soulmate and realize something shocking. The relationship was never meant to complete them. It was meant to awaken them, because sometimes Allah sends a lesson before He sends lasting love. Sometimes He allows temporary heartbreak to prepare your soul for permanent peace. And sometimes the greatest blessing hidden inside a painful relationship is not the person you met. It is the version of yourself you finally became after surviving the pain. When Allah removes them, your soul finally sees the truth. One of the most painful, yet most powerful signs that your relationship was a lesson rather than your eternal soulmate is this. The moment Allah removes them from your life, your soul slowly begins waking up from an emotional illusion you could not see while you were attached. At first, the pain feels unbearable. It feels like your chest is collapsing from the inside. Your mind keeps replaying memories every hour. You remember their words, their smile, the moments that made you feel loved, the future you imagined together, the promises, the late-night conversations, the emotional connection that once felt so real. And because the attachment was deep, separation feels like death to the heart. You wake up thinking about them. You sleep thinking about them. Every small thing reminds you of them. You check your phone hoping they return. You secretly pray for one more message, one more sign, one more chance. And during this stage, many people believe the pain itself is proof they lost their soulmate. But listen carefully. Pain alone does not prove destiny. Sometimes pain only proves attachment. Because human beings can become deeply attached even to things that are unhealthy for them. A person can become attached to emotional inconsistency, attached to temporary validation, attached to chaos, attached to people who repeatedly break their peace. And when Allah removes those people, the withdrawal feels unbearable at first, because the soul became emotionally dependent. This is why heartbreak can feel like addiction leaving the body. Your mind keeps searching for the emotional highs the relationship once gave you. Your heart struggles to accept the silence after becoming dependent on their attention. Your emotions keep fighting reality because attachment created emotional blindness. But slowly, after enough time passes, something begins changing. The emotional fog starts lifting. And this is where the terrifying truth finally becomes visible. You begin seeing the relationship clearly for the first time. You realize how anxious you constantly were. You realize how emotionally unstable you became. You realize how much overthinking consumed your life. You realize how much emotional energy was spent trying to keep the relationship alive. And suddenly you understand something shocking. You were not at peace inside the relationship. You were only emotionally attached to it. There is a huge difference between attachment and peace. Attachment says, I cannot survive without this person. Peace says, even during hardship, my soul still feels safe beside them. Many people mistake emotional intensity for destiny because they have never experienced healthy love before. They think constant obsession means the connection is special. They think emotional suffering proves loyalty. They think the inability to let go means the relationship must be written by Allah. But sometimes the inability to let go is simply the result of emotional dependency mixed with unhealed wounds. And Allah, in His mercy, removes people before the damage becomes permanent. This is why some separations feel like spiritual surgery. Allah removes the person your heart worshipped too deeply, not because He wants to destroy you, but because He wants to save your soul from drowning in unhealthy attachment. And at first, the removal feels cruel, because emotionally attached hearts cannot immediately understand divine protection. They only see loss. They only see heartbreak. They only see loneliness. They only see the empty space left behind. But Allah sees the future. Allah sees who that relationship would eventually turn you into if it continued for years. He sees the anxiety it would create, the emotional exhaustion it would create, the spiritual weakness it would create, the emotional instability it would create, the damage it would create inside your future. And because Allah knows what you cannot know, sometimes He removes people your heart desperately wants. This is why many people eventually look back years later and whisper, now I understand why Allah did not allow it to continue. But during the heartbreak itself, understanding feels impossible. You cry during sujood asking Allah why He allowed your heart to become attached. If the relationship was never meant to stay, you wonder why Allah allowed the connection to feel so powerful if separation was written from the beginning. And the answer is painful but beautiful, because sometimes the relationship itself was not the destination, the transformation was. Some people enter your life not to stay forever, but to awaken your soul forever. Without that heartbreak, maybe you would still be emotionally blind. Maybe you would still ignore red flags. Maybe you would still depend on human validation instead of Allah. Maybe you would still believe love means sacrificing your peace to avoid loneliness. But pain changes people, and heartbreak changes people even more deeply. There are individuals who returned sincerely to Allah after heartbreak destroyed their illusions. There are people who finally healed childhood wounds after painful relationships exposed them. There are people who developed self-respect only after emotional suffering forced them to stop begging for inconsistent love. This is why some of the strongest souls are created through heartbreak, because pain strips away illusions. When the relationship ends, you can no longer hide from reality. You are forced to confront what the relationship was truly doing to your mind, your emotions, your soul, and your relationship with Allah. And slowly, healing begins. Not instantly, not easily, not without tears, but gradually. At first, you simply survive the days. Then your thoughts slowly become calmer. The anxiety decreases little by little. Your emotional dependency weakens over time. Your heart slowly stops expecting their message every hour. And one day, something shocking happens. You realize you are breathing peacefully again. For the first time in a long time, your chest feels lighter. You begin sleeping better. You begin smiling naturally again. You begin reconnecting with Allah sincerely again. You begin enjoying life without constantly living in emotional fear. And that is when many people finally realize the relationship was never their safe place. It was their lesson. This realization changes everything, because now you stop romanticizing the pain. You stop calling emotional instability true love. You stop calling anxiety deep connection. You stop calling emotional suffering destiny. Instead, you begin understanding what real love should actually feel like. Real love should not constantly make you afraid of abandonment. Real love should not destroy your peace every week. Real love should not force you to lose yourself emotionally. Real love should not repeatedly weaken your relationship with Allah. A soulmate relationship may still face hardship, but deep inside, there is tranquility. And this is what many people finally learn after surviving a lesson relationship. Because lesson relationships often operate through emotional chaos. One day they make you feel special. The next day they make you feel worthless. One moment they pull you close. The next moment they emotionally disappear. One day they speak about forever. The next day they make you question whether they even care, and your nervous system becomes addicted to unpredictability. But healthy love does not operate through emotional starvation. Healthy love does not repeatedly make you question your value. Healthy love protects peace instead of destroying it. This is why some heartbreaks are actually acts of mercy from Allah, because had the relationship continued, the emotional damage might have become far worse later. Some people thank Allah years later for relationships that once shattered them emotionally. At the time, they thought losing the person would destroy their entire future. But later they realized the relationship would have destroyed their peace instead. And this is one of the deepest spiritual lessons a person can learn. Not every loss is punishment. Sometimes loss is protection wearing the clothes of heartbreak. Allah removes people because He sees conversations you never heard, intentions you never knew, future pain you never imagined, and emotional destruction your heart was too attached to notice. You cry because you lost the person. Allah protects you because He knows what losing yourself inside that relationship would eventually do to your soul. And sometimes the ending itself becomes the beginning of your healing journey. Because after the heartbreak, many people begin rebuilding themselves properly for the first time in their lives. They strengthen their connection with Allah. They heal emotional wounds. They learn boundaries. They stop seeking validation from emotionally unavailable people. They stop tolerating emotional chaos. They begin protecting their peace instead of sacrificing it. The heartbreak matures them, and eventually, they become emotionally healthier than they were before the relationship ever began. This is why lesson relationships are dangerous, but also transformative. They can either destroy you permanently or awaken you spiritually, and the people who heal successfully eventually realize something powerful. The relationship they once begged Allah to save was never their forever home. It was only a temporary classroom for the soul, a classroom that taught them self-worth, a classroom that taught them emotional discipline, a classroom that taught them the difference between attachment and peace, a classroom that taught them the danger of loving people more than loving Allah. And once the lesson is complete, Allah removes the person because the chapter has ended. Not every love story ends in marriage. Some love stories end in awakening. Some end in wisdom. Some end in healing. Some end in transformation. And years later, many people finally look back at the heartbreak that once made them cry every single night and realize that relationship did not destroy me. Allah used it to save me from becoming the wrong version of myself. Because sometimes the greatest blessing is not the person who stayed. Sometimes the greatest blessing is the lesson Allah taught you through the person who left. If you are still holding on to someone who keeps destroying your peace, listen carefully to this before you leave. Not every person you cry for is written for your future. Not every connection that feels intense is sent to last forever. And not every heartbreak is proof that Allah abandoned you. Sometimes Allah breaks your heart because your soul was becoming attached to something that was slowly breaking you from the inside. You kept asking Allah to keep the relationship alive while Allah was trying to keep your soul alive. And that is the painful truth many people only understand years later. There are relationships that bring you closer to Allah, and there are relationships that slowly make you lose yourself. There are people who enter your life to become your peace, and there are people who enter your life to become your lesson. The frightening part is this: sometimes the lesson feels more emotionally intense than real peace, because unhealthy attachment creates obsession. It creates emotional dependency. It creates fear of abandonment. It makes you believe you cannot survive without that person. But real love does not destroy your mental health. Real love does not constantly fill your chest with anxiety. Real love does not force you to beg for reassurance every single day. Real love does not make you lose your identity just to keep someone from leaving. A soulmate connection brings tranquility to the soul. A lesson relationship keeps you emotionally exhausted. And maybe, just maybe, the pain you are experiencing right now is not punishment. Maybe Allah is removing someone before they destroy the peace, future, and version of you that He is trying to protect. One day, you will look back at the heartbreak that once made you cry all night long, and you will finally understand why Allah did not allow it to continue. One day you will realize that what you called rejection was actually protection. What you called loss was actually guidance. What you called heartbreak was actually transformation. Because some people are not sent to stay forever. They are sent to wake your soul up. And if this video touched your heart even a little, comment below, Allah knows what my heart cannot see. And never forget this powerful truth. When Allah removes someone from your life, it is not always because you lost them. Sometimes it is because Allah does not want you to lose yourself. May Allah heal every broken heart, remove every unhealthy attachment, guide every confused soul, and bless you with a love that brings peace instead of pain. Ameen.